You are not hiding. You are not living below your means. You are living inside a version of your life that nobody around you has the context to read correctly, and you have no interest in giving them that context. Your neighbor borrowed your extension ladder 3 weeks ago and still has it. You have not asked for it back, not because you forgot, because the version of you your neighbor has built in his head, the guy who drives the old Subaru and works from home and seems like he is probably between things, that version of you is useful. You are not going to disturb it over a ladder. You have $500 million. Almost nobody knows. The people who do know are paid to know and have signed documents about it. Everyone else, the neighbor, the guys from your hometown, the woman at the credit union where you kept an account for 19 years, they are all operating on a version of you that is several $100 million out of date. You are not correcting them. The gap between what they think and what is true is the most valuable thing you own, and it costs nothing to maintain. This is what $500 million built from nothing actually looks like. It does not start with a vision. It starts with a problem nobody else wanted to deal with. You were 27, working for a logistics company in the Mid-South that moved goods through a patchwork of contracts built over decades and never systematized. You were not an executive. You were the person they called when something broke, which meant you understood, better than anyone in that building, exactly where the system leaked. You spent 8 months writing down everything you saw, not to show anyone, just because you needed to understand it. By month 6, you had 2 legal pads filled and a clear picture of where money was going that did not have to. By month 8, you had a model of what a leaner version could look like if you rebuilt from the process up instead of the contract up. You did not pitch it to your employer. You quit and built it yourself. The first year was a number you do not share at dinner, not because it is embarrassing, but because nobody there would understand what it meant. $187,000 in revenue against $163,000 in expenses, $24,000 net, less than your previous salary and more than enough evidence that the model worked. You were not paying yourself to get rich. You were paying yourself to prove something. That distinction separated the next 10 years from what everyone else was doing. You were not watching your income. You were watching your architecture. Whether the system held under pressure, whether it scaled without you in every room, whether a customer who came for one reason stayed for 3 and eventually could not explain why except that things just ran. That is what you were building. Not a company, a dependency. By year 3, you had 11 employees and a contract that made your previous year look like a rounding error. By year 6, you had offices in 2 states and a reputation you had never advertised for, because the people who mattered talked to each other, and what they said, quietly, was that your operation did not miss. By year 9, you had been approached twice about acquisition. You said no both times. The thing was not finished yet and you knew it, and the people making the offers did not. Nobody photographed any of this. No press, no profile, no announcement with a quote about disruption. Just a person in a mid-sized city running a business that moved things reliably and billed accurately, and answered the phone, compounding quietly while the people at the same conferences were out raising money and explaining their vision to rooms full of people doing the same. You were not in those rooms. You were in a warehouse in Tennessee at 6 in the morning trying to understand why a particular route was running 4 minutes slow on average, and whether 4 minutes mattered at the scale you were operating at. It did. That is the part nobody tells you. The 4 minutes always matter. Your attorney is a man named Gerald, transactional work for 30 years, one of maybe 4 people on earth who knows the full picture of what you are worth. He is not easily impressed. He has spent a career across from people with large numbers attached to their names and developed the particular neutrality of someone who learned that the number rarely tells you what you need to know about the person. He called you into his office 2 years ago to review your annual structure summary, the document his firm generates every year that consolidates your holdings across entities. He went through it section by section, the way he always does, without expression. When he got to the final page, he set it down and looked up and said, "You understand that you have built something that most people in your industry spend their entire careers trying to build and never do." He did not say it with warmth. He said it the way you might observe that a particular bridge is well engineered. As a fact, noted without ceremony. You said you understood. He nodded and moved on. You have thought about that moment more than you expected to, not because of what he said, but because of how little changed the day after. The summary sits in a file. The business is run. Tuesday looks like Tuesday. Here is what the structure contains. The original logistics operation, which you never sold and never will, moves goods across 14 states through a network you spent a decade building and another half-decade making impossible to replicate cheaply. Annual revenue north of $80 million. Margin thin by tech standards, thick by the standards of an industry where most operators fight over basis points. Most major customers have been with you more than 5 years, a few since year 2. They watched you when you were nobody and stayed. That is a different kind of loyalty than the kind you buy. A regional chain of industrial supply distributorships across 8 locations in 3 states, acquired over 7 years through owner-operator buyouts, and one estate sale where the family just needed it handled. The kind of business that shows up in no one's portfolio conversation because it sells fasteners and safety equipment to manufacturers and contractors. Combined annual revenue just under $40 million. The margins would surprise people who think unglamorous means unprofitable. A portfolio of commercial real estate, mostly light industrial and flex space, that began in year 4 when you needed a facility and realized owning was more interesting than renting. 11 properties across 4 states, mostly acquired when sellers needed speed and certainty over top dollar, which you could provide because you had no financing contingencies and no committee to approve. Combined, the portfolio generates just over $3 million a year in net rental income from tenants who are not you. And then the minority stakes. 3 businesses you have invested in over the past 6 years, each run by someone you watched long enough to form a view on how they handled pressure, not pitch decks. Pressure. You did not lead the rounds. You did not take board seats. You wrote checks, stayed out of the way, and received quarterly updates you read and occasionally respond to with one question. None are liquid. All 3 are growing. One may become the largest thing in this paragraph within 5 years. Gerald moved to the next item. That is the correct response to all of it. There is a man you have known since your industry's annual conference, which you attend every year because twice it has produced something worth the 2 days, and you have learned not to dismiss the possibility. He runs a private equity-backed roll-up in adjacent logistics space, and he is good at his job and he knows it and he makes sure the room knows it, which are 2 separate things that often travel together in people who have not yet learned the cost of the second one. He asked last year what your revenue looked like. It is the kind of question that is really a statement about his own. You told him things were steady, focused on quality over size. You watched his read shift in real time. In the vocabulary of people performing ambition in conference rooms, steady and quality over size translate directly to ceiling, which translates to not worth the full attention. He gave you the rest of the conversation at 60%. You spent the other 40 thinking about a routing inefficiency a regional manager had flagged the week before. You drove to that conference in a 4-year-old pickup with a dent in the rear quarter panel. You stayed in the conference hotel because that is where the hallway conversations happen, and hallway conversations are the only reason to attend. You wore the same sport coat for 3 years because it fits and is not memorable, which are the only 2 things you need a sport coat to be. The PE guy flew in on a charter. You know because he mentioned it in the way people mention things that are meant to sound incidental. He is building something real. The performance does not make the work fake. It just makes it expensive in ways that do not show up on the income statement. Until they do. This is what people misread about the truck and the sport coat. It is not frugality. It is the understanding that every dollar performing your success is a dollar not compounding inside the operation. The compounding is the whole game. The performance is noise that costs money. Your brother-in-law's name is Phil. He is a good person and a mediocre businessman, and you have known both things for a long time. 3 companies in 12 years. The first 2 did not survive year 3. The third is in year 2 and tracking the same direction. He called in February. He needed $60,000 to cover payroll through a slow quarter while he waited on a contract the client had basically confirmed. He did not ask directly. He asked the way people ask when they are not quite ready to hear the answer, with context around the number and not much weight on the request. You sat with the phone and felt something you still do not have a clean name for. Not sympathy and not detachment. The specific weight of understanding a situation more completely than the person inside it, which is its own kind of loneliness because you cannot hand the understanding over. You can only watch someone move through the part of the map you have already walked. $60,000 to you right now is not money. It is not even a decision. It is an amount that clears before the thought is finished. You did not send it. You asked Phil if you could see the business. Not the pitch, the actual business. The contracts, the cost structure, the receivables, the customer concentration, the reason the slow quarter was slow, and whether slow was the right word for what was happening. You spent 2 Saturdays with him. On the first Saturday, you found 3 things. A single customer representing 61% of revenue, which is not a business. It is a dependency with paperwork. A cost structure that had been built for the revenue he projected rather than the revenue he had, which is the most common and most expensive mistake a founder makes in year 2, and a contract with the incoming client that had not actually been confirmed. It had been verbally indicated by someone who was not the decision maker, which are two entirely different things, and the difference between them was the $60,000 hole. On the second Saturday, you helped him rebuild the model around what was actually true. You helped him have the conversation with his largest customer that he had been avoiding, the one where you find out whether the relationship is real or just comfortable. It was real. The customer extended the contract and added scope. You helped him cut 2 cost lines that were not producing and redirect the savings to a sales effort targeting a second major account, because 61% in one place is a problem that only has one real solution. He did not need the $60,000. He needed someone inside the actual problem instead of something that would let him avoid it for another quarter. The contract he was waiting on did come in. Smaller than he thought, but real. He called you when it landed. He said you had saved the company. He meant it as a compliment, and it was. He did not know what you had considered and chosen not to do. You will not tell him. The version of that story where you wrote a check makes him smaller in a way he would never recover from, and you have no interest in that. But the room inside your life where you made that choice is not a comfortable room. You sit in it sometimes. The arithmetic of what you could have done versus what you did is not always a clean calculation. There is a version of help that costs you nothing and solves the immediate problem and makes the person in front of you feel, for a moment, like the problem is solved. You chose not to give that version. Some evenings you are certain it was right. Some evenings certain is not quite the word. The email arrives on a Monday morning. You are at your desk at the original location, the same building you have been in for 11 years, because you like to be there and because the people here have noticed that you show up, and it has meant something to how they show up. The desk is not impressive. The chair cost $180 and is beginning to show it. Your phone shows a message from Gerald. The subject line says, Annual Structure Review, attached. You open it. It is Monday morning and there is nothing ceremonial about the moment. The number at the bottom of the summary page is $500 million. Not projected, not adjusted for optimistic assumptions. Verified, across every entity, at current conservative valuations. You read it once. You set the phone face down on the desk. Outside the window of this office, which faces the loading dock, 2 of your drivers are talking next to a truck. You cannot hear what they are saying. One of them laughs at something. The truck needs to leave in 11 minutes for its first stop of the day, and it will, because it always does. Because the people who work here know what on time means and why it matters, and you have spent 11 years making sure that what you know about it is something they also know. You reply to Gerald, understood. Let's talk Wednesday. Then you pull up the routing report, because there is an anomaly in Tuesday coverage you want to look at before the morning meeting. 11 years ago, you handed in your notice at a company that never knew what it had in the person filing the paperwork. You sat in your car in the parking lot after, and felt something that did not have an easy name. Not fear exactly, not confidence, something in between that felt like standing at the edge of something true. This is the same feeling, exactly the same, just with 11 years of Tuesday mornings behind it. The operation is not done. The 4 minutes still matter. The truck outside the window is leaving in 9 minutes, and that is the only number in this building that matters right now. You go to the morning meeting. Nobody knows what was on your phone 20 minutes ago. Nobody needs to. The work is the same as yesterday, and will be the same tomorrow. And that continuity, a number on a page changing nothing about what you are doing, is not a side effect of how you built this. It is the whole point of how you built this. Somewhere in the next ordinary week, someone is going to ask you what you do, and you are going to say logistics and watch their eyes move to the next thing. And you are going to feel what you always feel in that moment. Not frustration, not the urge to correct them. Something quieter than both of those. The particular satisfaction of a system that does not require anyone to understand it in order to run. You build something that most people in your industry spend their entire careers trying to build and never do. Gerald said so. He was right. What he did not say, because it was not his place to say it, is that the reason you built it, and the reason most people do not, has almost nothing to do with intelligence or capital or timing. It has to do with being willing to care about the 4 minutes when nobody is watching, every single day, for 11 years. The neighbor still has your ladder. You have not asked for it back. You are still working out whether that is discipline or something lonelier than that. Whether the version of you that nobody around you can read correctly is a deliberate strategy, or whether, somewhere along the way, it simply became the only version you know how to be. The truck leaves in 4 minutes. That is the only thing that is true right now.